Hi, so my chapter was chapter 15, which was evidence for evolution, and let's get into it. So, the idea of evolution came from biologists Neil Shubin and Ted Daschler, and it's because they went to the north of Canada, Canadian Arctic, and they found a fossil of a species called the Tiktaalik, which had fins and scales, but they also observed that it had neck bones and wrists. Now, the Tiktaalik showed something very major in evolution because it showed the transition from aquatic animals to land animals. So the transition from the ocean to be able to inhabit the land. And the Tiktaalik was a vertebrate, so it had a backbone. But invertebrates are animals that don't have backbones. And Charles Darwin is the guy in the pictures right here, and he came up with the theory of evolution, which he called the descent with modification. And the main idea of this theory is that all living things are related, and that all things evolve through natural selection. Pretty much what natural selection is the in a species, the organisms with the best genes will pass on, and those with the weaker genes will not pass on, because they're and organisms will prefer to mate with things with more desirable traits, no one with least desirable traits. Now, here we have our first question. So, what was the name of the vertebrate discussed in the last slide? Now, so it could be fish, Tiktaalik, Tarkatalik, or Tikataalik. So, just take a look. It's this animal that's shown right here in the image, and here's the answer. It's the Tiktaalik. So, as we discussed in the previous slides, the Tiktaalik was the species that was found up in the Canadian North, the fossil that made the transition from aquatic life to land. Now, fossils is what those two biologists found up north, and fossils are the preserved remains of organisms that were once living, and they can be preserved in materials such as ice or amber, which is the hardened tree sap that can crystallize an animal, like as you can see here with this bug. And also at the top right is a mammoth that was found encased in ice. Now, we classify and we find out how old these fossils are in the fossil record, which is a timeline that puts them into chronological order. My bad. That so you can find out, you can see how old one fossil is compared to another. And it's just a long timeline. And the people who study fossils, the profession is called paleontologist. So paleontology is the study of fossils. Radiometric dating is the process of how we find out how old a fossil is, and it's done through analyzing the isotopes in it and comparing it with other fossils to find out how old it is. So here on the left, the image is the fossil record. So at the top is more recent fossils, and the older ones, the farther down you go, is the older they get. So that's how you can see. Next question. What is the name of the system of fossils arranged in chronological taxonomic order? So here we have radiometric dating, the fossil timeline, the fossil record, or the fossil calendar. Now, this monkey's really thinking about it. I don't know if he has the answer, but you might have the answer. Let's take a look. It's the fossil record. So as I showed you in the past slide, what we started was the fossil record. What was a fossil record of what the older at the bottom was the older ones and the top was the newer ones. So that's how we can differentiate how old one is and how old the other one is, and we find out how old they could be through analyze the isotopes through radiometric dating. So here we have vestigial structures and homology. So vestigial structures are bones that through evolution have lost their use within an organism. So as you can see, the example I put is the leg bones in the snake. So snakes have leg bones, but obviously snakes don't have legs. But ancestors in the past probably did have legs, but eventually over time they lost the need for legs and just don't have them anymore. But they still have the bones. And in the top left, you can also see this whale. So whales actually have vestigial legs, but obviously whales don't have legs. They don't go running around in the ocean. They don't walk, but they still have the bones because obviously this can show that common ancestor that they had in the past probably did have legs, probably did have the capability to walk around on land, or just had the bones in the legs. But eventually they lost the need for them in the ocean, and they just lost their legs, but they still kept the bones. And homology is that different animals have similar bone structures within them. So as you can see here, we have a human, a dog, a bird, and a whale. Now, obviously, very different. Humans aren't dogs. Dogs can't fly like birds, and humans don't have fins like whales. But they all have similar structures in the bones, as you can see. The red bone matches up with everyone. They're all very similar, the white bone and the yellow bone. So, what this shows is that they all probably had a common ancestor that had this similar bone structure that they all have right here, but they have through mutations and natural selection, they all had different uses for it. It's not completely the same as a dog because humans have opposable thumbs, but and obviously it keeps going down. So dogs don't have wings, birds don't have fins, and so on and so forth. But they all had a common ancestor that have a similar structure. They just evolved to have different uses, but it's still similar structures between them. So the next question we have is, what can fossils be sustained in? So here we have amber, leaves, plastic, and water. Question isn't too hard, but we have a dinosaur here. That's a fossil. It's an example of a fossil. This could have been sustained in something, but let's take a look at the next slide. And the answer is amber. So amber, as I showed you earlier, is tree sap that hardens and crystallizes, and it can maintain things such as like small bugs like ants, butterflies, moths, and things like that. And that's pretty much what it can contain. So moving on. So here is the end of chapter 15 review, evidence for evolution, and these are the things that you should just go over before we have this final exam. So vertebrates and invertebrates. Vertebrates have a backbone, invertebrates don't. Fossils are the preserved bones or structures of organisms over time, and they can be preserved in things as ice or amber. The fossil record, it's a timeline of fossils where you can compare where certain fossils were, at what time they existed originally. Paleontologists are people who study fossils, and paleontology is the study of fossils. Charles Darwin is the man who coined the idea of evolution and natural selection. Natural selection is the stronger traits of a certain species was more likely to get passed on because they're more desirable to have in the future generation. Radiometric dating is the comparison of isotopes within a fossil that helps us understand when a certain fossil existed, and we can compare it with other fossils, which helps us put it on the fossil record. Homology are the similar structures between different species in their bones. So a human and a dog can have similar structures, but they're obviously not the same species, but they probably had a common ancestor between both of them. Vestigial structures are bones within an animal or an organism that have no more use, but probably an ancestor in the past had needed at the time, but now through evolution and natural selection, they no longer need it anymore. So, but they still have the bones. So yeah, that's the end of chapter 15. Thank you for watching, and yeah, cool, nice.